of the meeting. I believe we have now got the recording started. Any members of the public will be invited in from the lobby at my direction, which have we got any further people down there?
We haven't, Mr. Chairman, no.
No, right. Right, well, good afternoon then. We'll now start the meeting. I'm the Chairman, Councillor Ian Stokes, and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. I would like to begin by welcoming all councillors and officers, and also those members of the press and public who have joined or will be joining later. As we begin today's meetings, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that the meeting is being recorded. For any councillor who hasn't done so, I would like to ask that you turn on your cameras now. Please can I also ask you to turn off any telephones or put them onto silent mode and to remove any possible distractions. Any councillor who wishes to speak should use the chat function and type a comment such as me, speak or next. The chat box should only be used for members of the committee requesting to speak, voting during exception votes and requesting technical support. You can also use the chat function to indicate that you would like to raise a point of order or a point of personal explanation. Can I also ask that members indicate through the chat function if they are intending to leave the meeting, which I hope they aren't. Right. I will move on to item 1. Naomi, would you like to take the register of attendance, membership and apologies for absence?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've received no apologies for absence, so I'll just go through the register of attendance. Councillor Ian Stokes.
Present, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Wood.
Present.
Councillor Gloria Johnson.
Present.
Councillor Philip Knowles.
Present.
Councillor Mark Whittington.
Present.
Councillor Sue Woolley.
Present.
And Councillor Mrs. Jackie Smith.
Present.
Thank you. So that's all members of the committee present, Chairman, and I'll make a note of any non-committee members that are in attendance for the minutes as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So obviously you're confirming that there's a quorum if all members are present.
Yes.
Right. Item 2 is disclosure of interests. If any member with an interest will indicate through the chat function that wish to disclose an interest. It would appear that nobody has got an interest to declare. Right, so we go on to item 3. Minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of November 2020. I'll ask for any comments on the accuracy of the minutes from the previous meeting. There is item 5, updates from the previous meetings for future reference. Any comments? Paul Wood.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just that I do remember at the last meeting mentioning about the Kratos report. I appreciate it's not actually in the minutes, but it is actually in the work plan on page 145. But I was keen to see that coming back. But I noticed on page 145 in the work plan it is.
I think we've lost you, Paul, there. Can you? Have we lost connection?
I'm just going to check with IT, Chairman, what Councillor Woods is experiencing issues with.
Mr. Chairman, it does appear that he may have lost connection, so I don't know if you want to move on and then come back to Councillor Wood once we can get him back into the meeting.
Well, what he was saying was that he did raise a point, and it is being covered by the next meeting. So I feel sure that there is not a problem on that.
Yeah.
I certainly would like to move the minutes. Have I a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Whittington, I'm happy to second those.
Thank you. So we'll take a vote, even discounting Councillor Wood. Those against, if they would, or abstain because they weren't here, put a comment in the box on the left-hand side, and if there's nobody there, we'll assume that the minutes are carried. Yes, I think there are no comments, so we'll assume that those minutes are carried. So we'll go to item number 4, the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of November 2020. And again, it's only the accuracy of these minutes. And I'll move from the chair again, the same, that we accept them. Have I a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Whittington again. I'm happy to second those as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll take a vote on that. I note that Councillor Sue Woolley has abstained because she wasn't present. I can see no further people in there at the moment, but I'll give you a couple of minutes. So that seems to be in order. Those appear to be carried by exception. Item 5 is the updates from the previous meeting. These are listed on page whatever. I can't find it now. Item 4. There we are. They are listed on page 17 and 18, which gives us a comprehensive detail of what has happened to the items that we raised in the minutes on the 19th and the 30th. There was one there that says in progress. That was the one concerning the written explanation on the reverse depreciation and revaluation of reserves. That I know was sent by email to all committee members on the 29th of January with a full explanation, which we will find in the accounts next year so as not to confuse people, although when they read it, it might confuse them. So, are there any comments on that? Sue Woolley, Councillor Sue Woolley, I think you've made a point there.
Thank you, Chairman. And it's a bit of a job to know where to really quite put this, but on the 19th, we had a presentation of the Safeguarding Annual Report, and Carol Drury very kindly came back to us at a later date with an email giving, there was a question asked about numbers of taxi licenses and safeguarding training that had taken place, which was very helpful and I'm grateful for. However, I'm really not comfortable in that the safeguarding report just comes to governance and audit. I believe on the 19th that Carol did say that no, it doesn't go to any other committee. And I don't know whether it's within our remit or whether it should be someone else's decision. But I do wonder whether we ought to consider recommending that actually the safeguarding annual report ought to go to another committee before it comes to governance and audit. I say this because I've since spoken to a member of Carol suggested it might come under the licensing committee. And speaking to a member of the licensing committee, I understand that really all they do is approve or not licenses for premises rather than looking at pieces of work. And so for me, it would be a case of, well, do we consider or recommend that actually a little bit more ought to be looked into the safeguarding side of things, or do we ask for an internal audit report on it? I'm in your hands because I don't know which way it would go. I just don't think that I am not satisfied that we robustly audit the safeguarding arrangement.
That is a very interesting point. Have any other members got any comments? I mean, we don't like to duplicate committees and scrutiny committees doing duplication of work. Karen Bradford, you would like to come in on this?
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just help with the debate that's ongoing at the moment. I think there's a number of things that Councillor Woolley is identifying here. We have the Section 11 audit, which is our safeguarding audit, which is undertaken through regulation by the County Council to make sure that we are undertaking what we should do with due diligence and processing, and that comes to Audit and Governance Committee because it is an external audit of our services. From what I may be wrong, but what I'm probably picking up from Councillor Woolley is it's more around the development of our own policies and our own framework to make sure that you are reassured as members of Council, which is more than the external audit that's undertaken for the Section 11 audits. If that's the case, we can put, Chairman, if you're happy to put an action on there, we could look to see where that should be best reported to if we were to undertake a further review of our safeguarding responsibilities, our wider safeguarding responsibilities, and where that should come to.
Thank you, Karen. That is exactly what I was trying to get at, but you put it so much better than I did. Thank you.
I'm sorry I missed a bit of that. We have trouble with the dogs at the moment and they're chasing around barking, and I hope that you're happy with the answer, Sue.
Well, yes, Karen has just said, I think she's offered a suggestion to you, Chairman, so perhaps it might be better if Karen just repeats that to you.
It would be helpful. I'm sorry about that. I still haven't got rid of the dogs. Hope they don't bark.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. What I was proposing is that the Section 11 external audit that gets undertaken for the safeguarding responsibilities, which is undertaken by the Lincolnshire County Council safeguarding team, should really still come to this committee because it is an external audit. But I do also think that we ought to be looking a little bit wider about our safeguarding responsibilities and to make sure that we are doing everything in the spirit of what we should be doing around safeguarding. And we can take that away, look at that further review and which committee would be best to come to. As it's not an external audit, it's probably not appropriate for it to come to governance and audit, but we can identify where that should be reported to.
That sounds a very sensible suggestion. Thank you for that. Councillor Paul Wood, we're back with us, are we? Hello, Paul. We still seem to be having a little difficulty there. I can't hear him. Can anybody else?
No, Chairman. He seems to have come back in and then disappeared again, but we've got IT looking into it.
Thank you for that. Are there any other points on the action sheet? No? Well, I'd certainly like to thank Naomi and her team for preparing that, because I think that's very useful when we're dealing with the minutes. So we move on to agenda item 6, the Internal Audit Progress Report.
Yes.
You're there.
I am.
I didn't know who was there.
Apologies, I'm having IT issues as well. So.
Oh dear. Oh.
I hope I don't lose you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So agenda item 6 is our internal audit progress report, which starts on page 21, Mr. Chairman. Since the last Governance and Audit Committee meeting, we've finalised 6 reports, which are detailed on page 23. The summary details start on page 24. And what I intend to do, Mr. Chairman, is give an overview to the committee as there's details attached at the back, and then take any questions at the end, if that's all right.
You proceed, because it's very confusing when it's in 3 parts of the agenda pack.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. So all the findings that we raised across the 6 reports have been agreed with management. On page 24, you'll see the first details of the first report, which is contracts and procurement. As part of this review, Mr. Chairman, we sampled 23 contracts. So we did quite a big range of contracts as part of our sample size. This review has resulted in partial assurance, and we've agreed 7 medium and 1 low priority actions. So we noted that the central contract register is not maintained up to date, and there were 3 contracts which we sampled that were not recorded on the register. We also found some instances of non-compliance throughout our sample of 23 contracts related to things like termination clause, not included in 1 instance. There were some contracts where we couldn't evidence that monitoring was taking place, evidence of risk assessments and target completion dates. And there was 1 instance where the purchase order was raised after the invoice received, and 1 instance where the purchase order was issued before the contract was signed. So a number of areas that have come out of that review, and as I mentioned, management have agreed those findings, and there is an action plan in place to look into those. On page 26, Mr. Chairman, we also undertook a business continuity and emergency planning review. It was a good result, a substantial assurance, which is a positive opinion. We raised only 1 medium and 1 low priority action. We found that there were business continuity plans in place, but in the current pandemic, we noted that they didn't capture the lockdown processes to ensure that lessons are being learned, etc. That's not to say that nothing else was captured. There's other things that, as part of that business continuity plans, that were in there. So we're giving this a substantial assurance, Mr. Chairman. On page 27, rent collection and arrears. This review resulted in a reasonable assurance, which is still a positive opinion, and we agreed 3 medium priority actions. The main one was really around the information around rents on the council's website. That was out of date. We noted that the debt recovery policy is also out of date, and in 7 out of the 20 arrear cases that we looked at, we couldn't evidence that action had been taken. That's not to say it wasn't taken, we just couldn't see any evidence to confirm that action was being taken against those arrears. The next report was the follow-up. It's the second follow-up, Mr. Chairman. We're given this good progress. This is a separate item on the agenda as item 7, so I'll cover it at that stage if that's okay. And on page 28, you'll see details of the repairs stock control audit that we've undertaken. This has resulted in no assurance. We raised 2 high and 7 medium actions, which have been agreed with the management team, and I understand there's an action plan in place for these. The 2 high priority ones related to the stock details are kept on a spreadsheet which is maintained but is overwritten as soon as it's updated. So a full audit trail is not evident in terms of what stock is ordered, what's being held and what's being used. We also found instances where we could not confirm records of stock used and signed out, although we know that items were signed out for repair jobs. We also noted a number of things around policies and procedures, lack of training, no process for identifying excess stock, no process for writing off stock, and no additional security measures on council vans. So a number of areas that have come out of that review, Mr. Chairman. The next report was on section 106. This resulted in partial assurance. We've agreed 1 high, 1 medium and 3 low priority actions with the management team. The details at the back of the report, you'll see there's a number of areas where we just consolidated into 1 high priority action, but the main gist of that was, Mr. Chairman, that there's no formal process by which status, remaining balances and expiry dates of section 106 contributions are monitored. There is also no structured process whereby the council are able to identify whether planning obligations have been discharged by a developer, and no routine information is received from other council departments. So a number of areas there. These were discussed with the Assistant Chief Executive, and I understand that the council has already put an action plan in place. And as part of that action plan, my understanding is that the findings from this review have also been incorporated into that. Appendix A on page 32, Mr. Chairman, shows progress against the plan. We're on track to deliver all the audit work, and thanks to the management team for their cooperation. In the current pandemic, we've still managed to carry on with the internal audit work. We've got 5 remaining audits, and these will hopefully be completed and presented at the next meeting. So we're on track to deliver all the audit work by the end of March. In terms of page 35, Mr. Chairman, Appendix B, other matters. I think the key for one here, Mr. Chairman, is that we're still working through our audit work, but as you know, there's been a number of reports where we've given negative assurance opinion, and that will impact on our overall opinion at the end of the year. But as I said, we've still got 5 more remaining audits to complete. Pages 37 right through to page 76, Mr. Chairman, give the details of the executive summaries and the action plans for the reports that I've just gone through briefly. I'll take any questions that members may have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. It's very difficult to follow this, as I said before, because the majority of your work is shown on those latter pages, 37 to 70 something. But I presume that you have this for all of your internal audits all over the country, this formula, how you set it out, which doesn't make it awfully easy to follow.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mr. Chairman. I mean, we're more than happy. I mean, we're just formulating a plan, which is again a separate agenda item, but more than happy to change the reports to meet your requirements. What we try to do in the first part of the report is to very much give the members a very high-level review of the key issues that are coming out of the report. But we appreciate that members and management team will want to see some greater detail in terms of executive summaries and action plans and the dates of implementation, so hence why we attach that to the back of the report. But one of the things I didn't mention, and apologies, but when you look at the reports at the back, what you'll see is, as well as identifying some of the issues we found, we also highlight the positives, the key findings. So what the reports at the back are what management get, so we just make them available to you as well, so you can see the full range of the findings, positive as well as any issues that are coming out. But as I said, going forward, you know, we can have those conversations. So when we start the new audit plans from the 1st of April, if members want to see something different, more than happy to, you know, take on any suggestions from you and make sure we do that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Paul Wood.
Yeah, thank you.
Back with us.
Well, last 2 times I've tried to speak, I've lost my internet, so I'll give it another go.
Oh dear.
Thanks for your audit report. I agree with what the chairman said. I must admit I find it a little bit confusing to try and follow it. So maybe if that could be sorted out, as the chairman suggested, that would be great. On the audit report on stock, no assurance, that's a bit disappointing. I understand maybe Paul Crowe is online. I just wondered, is the solution going to take very long, or is it going to be sorted out fairly quickly? I know we've got the medium term and high level things that want doing. So I wonder if you could have a response from the manager, please. I believe it's Paul Crowe.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm quite happy if Paul Crowe is on to respond. If not, I will attempt to do so for you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just having difficulty getting my video on. Apologies. There we go. I think I've managed to do it.
You have.
Thank you. Sorry, could you repeat the question? I was getting quite a bit of feedback. Apologies, Chair.
Yeah. Well, it's just on the stock control. I know it seems we have got no assurance. I just wondered, what's your position? You're interim manager there, aren't you? I understand.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Wood.
Are you confident you are going to be able to react to the comments that Auditor made and correct the situation?
Yes, we've picked up this up in the previous void report that's gone through SC and Cabinet. What we're doing is we're closing the stores completely. We're moving to impress van stocks. We're currently in negotiation with the build base to get that in place, and as an interim measure, we've got the office which the repairs manager is based, who is undertaking the stock control of the existing stock in there, and then ordering some additional stock through build base.
Oh, okay, I hear that. Are you confident that build base will be able to provide all the material? Are you going to get all your materials from build base?
Yes, we've currently got a contract with build base. The contract's due is coming up for renewal, and we're just currently going through the procurement of a new one. But we've had that arrangement in place with build base for a number of years.
Okay, and they'll be able to provide all the electrical, everything, will they?
Not just... they're the ones that provided the stock for the stores that we were holding. Okay,
and how long do you think that will take to get the new implications in then?
We're looking from the beginning of March, where we go live with the new void structure.
Okay, thank you. That seems pretty confident.
I'm very confident.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Oh, I'm confident, otherwise I'll have Robert coming looking for me.
He is now, he's next to you on my picture.
Yeah, he's next to me on my picture, yeah. And yeah, be careful because Robert's very fierce.
Yeah, I've realised that. Thank you.
What a reputation.
Did you want to speak, Sue Woolley?
Yes, please. It is also on this same subject, and I suppose what bothers me somewhat is if there's no detail. Being very blunt, how do you know that people aren't taking more than they need and using it in jobs that they do elsewhere? If you've got procurement cards, how do you know, if there's no cross-referencing, how do you know whatever is picked up with the procurement card from build base, whether it tallies with what is needed in the repair job?
If I can come in there, please, Chair.
Yes, certainly.
I can explain that. There's a digital system that's in place, so we can every time something is used on a van, it's got a QR code on it that gets knocked off the stock. We can monitor that in real time through the software system, and then we can monitor and audit exactly who's buying what job it was used for. So we won't have exactly the same problem as we had with the physical stores, where people were taking stuff that was in effect, we believe was over and above what they actually required.
So what was happening to what was being taken that was over and above required?
Well, we believe that they were taking I only know a certain amount of this because I started after the audit had been undertaken. From what I understand, that the use of the materials and the return of those materials that hadn't been used, there was no assurance during the audit that was taking place. Whereas we can't definitely say that they were using more than was supposed to be. We can't actually say that they weren't either. So that was the whole purpose of us looking at a different methodology for delivering the materials, and also one that did involve us having to put large amounts of cash into something that we were holding in a storeroom that we may never use.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
That answers your question. Thank you.
Can I come in, Chairman, for a moment?
Well, on that point.
Yeah.
You're fine. Yes, please do.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to assure members of the committee and, of course, other councillors listening that we have had a change in the staff structure from having a repairs manager that used to sit under the Assistant Director of Housing to a three-line personnel, one of which is the Housing Technical Services post, of which Paul is interim very adequately employing, one that looks after the housing rollout, and of course the housing manager on the other side. So in readdressing the balance of how our repairs and our improvements are in fact conducted, we have also moved to a van tracking system. We are moving to this stock system of replacement of items used, and then that they are attached to the job so that we now know in the future. And indeed, our computerized systems will indeed make for a much more accountable system for the future. I can't put back, I wasn't responsible for it, but I also can't put back what the previous practices were, and I understand the question in its fullness that Councillor Woolley makes. What I hope is the message today is that what we are now doing more than matches an improvement on the for audit. Well, I know it has a significant improvement on the audit for the next audit that will come to you, and I hope that gives members confidence in what we are, where we are, and what we're actually doing. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Robert.
Chair,
could I ask the auditors whether they will do a follow-up on that?
Chair, may I just have a word? I've been trying to get into the speak panel and I'm unable to do so.
Oh, are you? Oh dear.
At some stage in the future, can you come back to me, please?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you heard my question, did you?
I did, Mr. Chairman. Yes. So for all the audit work we do, we will do a follow-up. But as Paul mentioned, they're likely to change the entire system. But saying that, we will still go through those controls around stock security, purchase ordering, following it through. So we will do a follow-up, and we'll report back those results of those follow-ups in the future, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll ask Mark Whittington, then I'll come to you, Philip.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I've got 4 questions, really. But the first one really just carries on from this issue around the stock. So, if possible, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that one first, and then get a response, and then ask the further 3 I've got. Because I've had experience working as a stock and inventory accountant in the private sector, And I'm a little bit concerned actually that because the report kind of speaks about sort of spreadsheet models and their software system, and I'm just wondering, you know, about the levels of control that are there, because we've seen before with the report into the housing maintenance, you know, the danger of keeping spreadsheets, because especially spreadsheet models that can be updated by a number of different people, because you then suffer potentially from stuff being overwritten, and you suffer from issues around version control and all kinds of things like that. And then leading on from that, so I need a bit more assurance around what's been going on. And also, the word that springs to mind potentially is obsolescence, because holding stock costs money. You know, any stock that's sat on shelves has incurred a cost of purchase. It's incurring a cost to be stored. Potentially, if it then is used, there may be further costs. But also, if it becomes obsolescent, there's also a cost attached. So, I just want a bit of sort of reassurance around cost control of what we're actually trying to do, because obviously, you know, any problems with stock ordering, stock control will cost the council. So that's my sort of questions and my concerns around the stock control system, obsolescence and cost. I'm just wondering if those could be answered first, Mr. Chairman, then I'll ask my further questions. Thank you.
Who's going to answer that? I think the new system should solve most of those problems. Paul Crow.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, you're correct. The new software system that we're looking to implement will enable us to actually cost what we're using. Will enable us to audit and will also provide us that information in real time. It will also do away with any investment in materials and holding them in stores, and also any issues with obsolescence with certain components, because obviously we would only be picking those up directly from the merchants. So hopefully I can give the councillor some assurance over that.
You have, thank you, Paul. So in effect, you're almost moving to a just-in-time sort of approach to stock control.
Yeah, absolutely, councillor.
That's fine. That's great. Thanks, Paul. That's given me the reassurance I was looking for on that.
Thank you.
If I can now, Mr. Chairman, ask my other questions. The first one relates to the contracts and procurement. And again, the auditors refer to this issue of spreadsheets being used, and potentially some contracts have not been recorded properly. So from my previous comment I was making around, you know, the difficulties using spreadsheets that potentially can be updated by different people. I'm just wondering what can be done to alleviate that problem. Is there some kind of potential procurement software that possibly the council could sort of look to implement, which might sort of, in the same way as Paul has just explained how the new stock control system will alleviate a lot of those issues, how a similar sort of piece of software might actually be able to handle and record contracts and procurement issues a bit better. The next one is around debt control. I've also had experience of working as a debt control manager in the past as well, and I used to receive on a sort of monthly basis a report of all outstanding amounts and you know, an action that was being undertaken for it. And you know, certainly the system we had was after 14 days a reminder letter for payment would go out, followed by subsequent letter a couple of weeks later. And again, if nothing was then received, it would then come to me, and I made the decision, you know, if we decided to pursue a claim through the civil courts. I did actually go to the civil courts on several number of occasions to represent the authority I was working for in order to you know, gain monies back. I'm just wondering what sort of system we've got around that, because a little bit concerning that potentially there may be some debts that have been uncollected. And my fourth and final question is around the Section 106 audit. and the comment that the auditor made about no formal process for monitoring contributions from developers, having difficulties in seeing if the planning obligations the developers had committed to. That gives me a great deal of concern, because I'm really, I think it's really important that if we do agree Section 106 contributions with developers, that they are actually monitored, recorded properly, and implemented. Because as far as I'm concerned, Section 106 contributions from developers in many cases are used, because developments do increase local costs locally to ourselves and to other bodies as well. So for me, it's really key that we do actually collect all the Section 106 contributions that have been promised to us by developers. So I just need some reassurance around that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for those. Richard Wiles would like to come in on your stock items and regarding the rent collections before I come to you, Philip.
Yeah, so I think, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Jeff Upton and obviously Councillor Reid are on the call for the 106 question, but if I can just rewind just a little bit on perhaps some of the concerns that Councillor Woolley had expressed, and then followed up by Councillor Whittington around stock. Just for members' awareness, as you know, we have a whistleblowing procedural in place with our partners at Lincolnshire County Council, and earlier there were some concerns expressed around the robustness of the stock arrangements down at the DWO through the whistleblowing process, and we did use our colleagues across Rutland Partnership to look at the robustness and fit for purpose arrangements around stock, inventory and controls, and this work ran in parallel and complemented the internal audit work that was undertaken as part of the audit that you've been looking at this afternoon. So just to reassure you that this has been looked at from both angles, from both an operational and procedure perspective, from the counter fraud angle, but also to complement the internal control framework tests that the internal audit have been doing as well. So those two pieces of work have been brought together to deliver and support the action plan that Councillor Reid and Paul have been talking about. So hopefully that just provides a layer of reassurance to members that all the risks and all the weaknesses have been identified through these complementary pieces of work. In terms of the contract question that Councillor Whittington posed, and you may be aware that we actually use a system called ProContract, which is actually hosted by Procurement Lincolnshire, who we were a partner with up to last year. And we continue to be part of that software arrangement, working alongside the County Council again. So it's not quite a spreadsheet. That's probably doing it a little bit of a disservice. It is an online platform, but it does rely on, as a lot of these systems do, it does rely on the officers concerned with the procurement activity to populate it sufficiently and make sure the information held on it is accurate and robust and relevant, and that's the system that audit looked at as part of their sample checks. So that's the public facing part of the transparency requirements of the council. So all of our contract registers entries are through this system that we've used alongside partners in Lincolnshire, and it is then amplified out onto our website for the public to look at. So, but the weakness in that, of course, it does rely on officers who are doing the procurement to keep it up to date, keep it relevant and keep it accurate, and that's part of the actions that have been identified through the work. Just finally on rent collection, it's an interesting audit, and we did have a debate about whether or not the timeliness of this would be right. Members will be aware earlier in the year we did actually suspend all recovery in response to the pandemic, and in keeping with most authorities, as you know, the courts shut down and have only just started to reopen, and that's a bit stop-start at the moment, to be honest. So a lot of the recovery has been suspended throughout the whole of the summer period. We actually haven't sent any reminders out until October of this year. So the rent recovery, whilst it looked at the procedures and processes, it was inevitable it was going to find instances where there's been very little activity. So we took a very softly approach during this period, and we only targeted and identified those tenants that we felt would be in significant financial distress over this period, signposted them to things like discretionary housing payments, universal credit, and council tax support benefit if appropriate as well. So it was always going to be the case that this audit would not perhaps be a fair representation, and I'd be keen to invite audit back over a more normalised period to ensure that our processes are fit for purpose. But as Councillor Whittington describes, that's exactly how it works. It follows a very prescribed process in terms of recovery actions over prescribed timelines, and that's all in that recovery policy. So it is a very procedural led recovery process with interventions by officers on a direct approach on an exception basis. So that's hopefully provides some reassurance. But as I say, I would invite audit back at a later date to do a further review in more normalised times. Thank you.
Thank you. We still have the section 106 to be answered. Who was got?
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Just want to say, Mr. Chairman, just want to thank Richard. I got the assurance on those things I was looking for. Thank you.
Are we happy to move on to the 106, Chairman?
Yes, quite. Before I get Philip Knowles in.
Sorry, if I may, Chairman, I have got a speak, and it does refer to the stock control. So if I could just drop this in before you do move on. The repair stock control, I don't know if Richard or Paul can answer me this, but the present system, how long has it been in operation for? And then the next question is, has it ever been reviewed by internal audit before, and if so, when? And the third question would be, internal audit have said that they will be reviewing this, but didn't give a timeline. So can we have a timeline, please?
Councillor, it's Paul Crowe, if I may. I can probably pick up two of those points, the first two. How long the stores have been operating, I don't believe it's been very long. I believe it's been somewhere in a region of about 12 months or maybe slightly less. With regard to the second point, which unfortunately I've completely forgotten. So if the councillor could just remind me, please.
I wanted to know how long the process, and you've just raised more questions now, because if a process has only been in operation in less than a year, then to have it at this stage with no assurance, I don't know whether you've misunderstood me in that I wanted to know how the process that has come to this, got to this no assurance, how long that was in operation for until it was realised that it wasn't working as well as it could or should. Then the other one was the audit. Has there ever been an internal audit before on the stock control? And the third question was, internal audit did say that they would be reviewing it, but did not give a timeline as to when it would be reviewed. I obviously don't expect you to answer the third one.
Yeah. The first one, I do believe that it hasn't been running for very long, and I believe it has been slightly less than 12 months. From what I understand, it was put in place due to concerns about the availability of materials at the COVID outbreak. So I believe it was set up for that purpose. Your second point, I'm not aware of any internal audits being undertaken in that area until the audit that was undertaken by RSM. However, I am aware that the former repairs manager, Alan Smith, did have concerns when he came in to the business, which I believe was roughly round about March's time, with how that was being operated. So had started to look at it, to put some different controls in place.
So it was not right in March. That's the bit I'm trying to get to, is how...
Yeah, it was wrong from when it was set up. I don't think it was set up right. It was set up quickly, and I don't think anyone actually stood back and said, right, okay, if we're going to do this, we need to put these control mechanisms in place. We need to audit this way, and we need to implement this stock control methodology. I think it was rushed and an ill-conceived idea.
Okay, and so if the internal audit officer would just come back to me and tell me the proposed timelines.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. So in terms of our timelines, so what we do is we follow up any actions from the previous year in the following year. So one of the agenda items later on is around the next year's audit plan, and what we will do as part of that, we anticipate going forward doing more follow-up reviews. So the timeline will be in the next 6 months. We can follow up those actions, but it all depend on the implementation dates, and they all depend on the new systems and processes being put in place. But in terms of our follow-up work, we do it the following year. But from our perspective, there's not a problem doing it earlier, so we can do that as one of our first follow-ups.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you.
If I may ask, Karen Bradford would like to come in, please.
Who's the chairman here, Mr. Reid?
Apologies.
I had promised somebody else first. Can I have Councillor Philip Knowles in, please, because I've deferred him a few times.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much indeed. Much of what I was going to say has been said by Councillor Whittingham, so I'll not repeat too much. I was very concerned about the lack of just-in-time procedure in the stock control, and I've just one added question, please, on stock control, and that is, who specifically will be performance managed to make sure that the new stock control system rectifies some of the faults that have been clearly identified that may lose to it may have lost control of stocks during the preceding procedures in the past. So that's a specific question. I also have a comment on S106, if I may, at this stage, and that is that I was very, very concerned about the S106 report and the importance of it. I know there's some personal circumstances with Bourne Town Council. We were trying to get an S106 statement for Bourne for at least 5 months at the end of 2020, and we're never able to get any statement whatsoever. We were constantly being told that there was a zero balance, and at the very last minute, at the end of December, when apparently the SKDC had to give a legal report to somebody, all of a sudden we find out that the sort of balance that we were saying there was in fact correct. So as of 6 months ago, nobody in SKDC could give us any indication whatsoever about what S106 balances we had for Bourne. Now that clearly is not satisfactory. Now, I understand work is going to be taken to try and sort this out, but there is a reference in the report to no committee getting the information that it should do on this, and no committee having access to this sort of information in the past. One assumes it would go to finance, but that's not for me to say. But if it goes to finance, there should be a 6 monthly statement of the 106 balance for each of the areas, and there should be a look at how that money is being spent, but not only that, what the contractors are doing, what the developers are doing in order to make sure that that money is given to us and we spend it properly, and we never ever have to give it back to a developer at the end of that time. So we need reports, presumably through finance, that does that. But I would also ask that we send town councils a 6 monthly report of the SO106 balance for them at the same time, so they can be aware and be working on that basis on an accurate report. Does that make sense, Mr. Chairman?
To some extent it does, but I'm not sure that you're entitled to it. As a councillor you probably would, but I don't see why the town councils should get it, because you'll be wanting all the parish councils then to follow up, and it's not necessarily, it could be a big process.
Regardless of the process, the only way we've got a situation now in Bourne where we've got some monies that are nearly at the end of their 5 years, and if they are not spent soon, they will go back to the developer. Now, we don't want that to happen. And we've recently, to be fair, this week, I think, have been told that we can spend some of the balance on furniture for playing areas, which was promised in 2016, I think, 2017. So it's a long, long overdue. And we've only just now been given permission to spend some of that money for what it was done. And if the town councils are not kept up to date with the monies that may be available to the town through the 106 system, then they won't be able to make sure that that money is well spent and spent properly before it goes back to the developers. So I would hope that we are in a position to be able to give town councils information about 106 money. Otherwise, we will just ask for it and have to get it separately. But there's no reason why town council shouldn't have a 6-monthly statement if a committee here is going to have a 6-monthly statement on what's happening with S106 money. Thank you very much, Chair.
I see Councillor Robert Reid was actually nodding his head there. Would you like to come in on that point?
No, I'm quite happy to go with debate and speak about 106 when we're ready to actually go there, Chairman. Or are you ready for me to do that now?
Well, we're ready now, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the integral progress report for the Section 106 audit really it's been accentuated by the infrastructure funding statement, of which we've had to prepare the first one for the end of December, and now will be quarterly. The planning enforcement team thanks the auditors for the thorough review of the process around the monitoring and collection of developer contributions through 106 agreements and associated with planning approvals. It is something that has been identified for some time. The 106 process was already under review, as I've just said, by officers in the team at the time of audit was carried out, and the review was part of the work required to enable publication of the Council's aforementioned first infrastructure funding statement in December. The IFS, the infrastructure funding statement, being required by the new national requirements introduced for local authorities. The audit team have identified areas of improvement that have largely already been identified and actions to address them. Actions have been commenced to formalise the processes and implement the management actions suggested by the audit team, and look forward to confirming that these will be completed within the timeframes of the report. That is sort of the formal response I should give, but on top of that, I take quite earnestly the remarks of Philip Knowles with regards to 106 predicaments in Bourne. They have been similar, Chairman, also at Stamford, and I have had to ask your son yesterday at Cabinet to actually agree to a proposed housing capital programme adjustment at the last minute due to make sure that we retain 106 receipts to the tune of 440,000. To answer the question as to whom further reports will go to, I know that I'm going to present them to the Planning Committee on a quarterly basis. Where else they are to go, I will be interested, and I'm sure Richard Wiles will put me straight as to where else they will need to go in the mechanism, but I have every intention of seeing that they're there, and that a clarity for the future by the infrastructure funding statement will make for a monitoring process for both governance and audit, and indeed all other committees. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Robert. I know that Karen Bradford wanted to speak. I'm not quite sure which subject he's on, but we seem to have got quite a variety at the moment. Karen.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm trying to keep up with which report we're on, and I think the way the reports are presented, in the future, I think we need to look at how these reports are presented so members are clear about which report we're talking about at each time, and to have them split over a couple of reports, personally for me, I'm finding it difficult to keep track. But hopefully I can just add into a little bit of the conversation and debate to assist members in consideration of your reports today. In reference to the stock report, yes, it's extremely disappointing. The establishment of the process that we had in place was undertaken in March of that year as a response to COVID and is moving into critical service delivery. The process was part of a business continuity plan, which was that had been developed by and approved by the team. But as we can see, it wasn't at all with the right governance arrangements in place, or could stand up to scrutiny. So therefore, once we had identified these and we'd had the audit done, then it was necessary to make immediate actions to change it. Not only had we had the whistleblowing, as Richard has notified you of, there were some concerns on Facebook as well that we picked up about usage of stock. So it was important that we responded. I can assure members that any officer that was involved in the establishment of this system is now not employed by this division. In reference, moving on to section 106, if I can just identify with all members that we do publish an infrastructure funding statement on our website, which details all the 106 amounts that we do hold. But I do think, as Councillor Reid has mentioned, that we need to be proactive as an organisation as well. And if there are 106s that we are holding on behalf of town councils, parish councils or other areas, then we should be sharing that with our partners. We're not the bank account, and we should be working with our partners on that one. So I'm hopeful that with proper due process and due diligence with our 106, and we will be in a position then to share appropriate reports on a quarterly basis with the planning committee, with this audit and governance committee on a 6-monthly basis, and all our partners. So nothing further to add, Chairman. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Richard wants to speak on section 106.
Well, it was just to add to what Karen and Councillor Reid said. I'm happy to circulate the actual hyperlink document that we are referring to, because I think in terms of what Councillor Knowles has talked about, that I think you might find that very helpful as at least a starting point to understand the financial holdings that the council has in respect to 106 and how the allocations have been dealt with during the year. As Councillor Reid says, it's now a statutory requirement to publish that, and it's been on our website since December of 2020. So I'm happy to circulate that link across to help members.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Paul Wood, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's about section 106 agreements. I appreciate what Chief Exec has said and what Richard has said. I'm a little bit confused though, because it strikes me we employ an officer of the council to deal with section 106 agreements. We publish things on our website, and yet the audit report refers to the fact that we have no formal process by which the status, remaining balances, expiry dates of section 106 agreements are monitored. So I can't, is there something wrong there? Am I missing something? Because the audit report makes it quite clear that we're not recording these things, but yet we employ somebody to do it and we put details on the website. So why is there a disparity there? What assurance can I have that is it being done, or audit wrong, or audit picked up that something's not being done that should be? Because it looks like the auditor picked up a failure in our systems, but I understand we've got somebody monitoring that. So can anybody answer that, Richard, or Chief?
Yeah, can I come in? Sorry, sorry, Chair, it's Jeff Upton.
Indeed you can. Not that
Yeah.
to see your picture, but there we are.
Oh, apologies. I've just got used to using the microphone and the video. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I don't know the full history in terms of the amount of time that role has been there, Councillor Wood. But I think, as Councillor Reid was talking about earlier, the process of pulling together the infrastructure funding statement has shown some formality that's needed in the way we operate the monitoring and the actual processing of Section 106 contributions and obligations. And I think the communication that's gone on around the infrastructure funding statement has helped us corporately to pull together, you know, how that formal procedure and process that's been highlighted by the audit can actually be documented. So we've got some surety going forward. I think from my experience working in other authorities, there are, you know, I've said this about the planning system before, for those of you who have been in different sessions with me, there's one planning system and 300 odd ways of delivering it. But I think by having something like the infrastructure funding statement that has happened last year has, I think, helped us on that journey in formalising some processes. So those sort of formal relationships, which are, you know, a lot of the time iterative, we can formalise those across, as mentioned in the report, across legal, finance, planning and other colleagues who sometimes, you know, are recipients of contributions, as well as communication to, as mentioned earlier by Councillor Knowles, out to town councils as well. So I'm confident from what I've seen so far that with the dates we've got, we've looked at putting things in place by the end of April, that those actions set out in the audit report will be there, will be delivered, and hopefully that will give people the confidence going forward. I think the first reporting cycle we're looking at, the quarterly report would be in the spring, and then hopefully by that stage we'll have those formal processes and people will be able to see that, not just the report through at the moment suggested to planning committee, but also the other communication that was referenced out to town councils and others. Thank you, Chairman.
So if I could just ask Jeff then, so before he disappears. So, where's he gone? So Jeff, you fully accept the audit report, don't you? We're still at, so you fully accept the audit report. Things have got to be done. You've got a program in place to do it. And are you going to be are you ultimately responsible for ensuring it does happen then, Jeff?
Yeah, my name's against the actions, Paul. Councillor Wood, yeah, they are. And as I say, I think the infrastructure funding statements and the work around that, as Councillor Reid mentioned earlier, has been really helpful in showing where we need to go and move that forward quite quickly, as suggested in the timelines in the report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other committee members requiring to ask any questions on the internal audit process? If not, I'll call on Councillor Ashley Baxter, who wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. My comments are similar to those of Paul Wood, I think, and that's trying to establish who is responsible. And if we're being told that Jeff Upton is responsible, although I think trying to think of the right way to say it. Long term, will Jeff Upton be responsible for this issue long term? And if not, then who will be? It used to be someone in the economic development team, and this is an issue that we have been discussing over many years. I've just looked back through the minutes of this meeting, and it was discussed in detail in 2016, and there were shortcomings identified. And I don't expect you to remember, Chair, but you attended a meeting in March 2011, which also briefly mentioned the issue of 106.
Well, there you are.
10 years ago. And I think the reason why it was a hot potato then is because Market Deeping Town Centre missed out on some funding that should have come alongside the development of the Tesco. And so everybody at the time said we really must do better on this, and we must have accurate records. And I think that's why probably Bourne Town Council and other town councils, including Market Deeping, should be part of the team on this. And I see absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be sharing information with town councils, which they would be able to get through a freedom of information request anyway, even though it takes a long time. So yes, this is a real issue because we have all these developers. Everybody moans about the development, and one of the things that can be said in kind of to appease some of the people who complain about the developments is we get this investment from the developer. If we then let that slip, then we're really failing. As for the rest of the report, I mean, I won't go into it, but it's a shame when so many of the items are either amber or red, and obviously the housing is being addressed in a different area, so I won't say any more about that now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Reid.
Thank you very much. So in a nutshell, as Jeff Upton has confirmed, we've enforced the position for our 106 funding arrangements, and we've now put they're under his jurisdiction as one facet, and the office has been moved into our enforcement team. Secondly, that works now in conjunction as checks and balances with a member out of the finance team. And thirdly, it is integrated with the housing service, of which part of the monies go to, as we know, for affordable housing and indeed for recreation purposes, and indeed the other deliveries, contributions to both health and to education, which are obviously county council functions. So I hope that sort of makes a clarity on the way forward. And I'll be really honest. Yes, I think there has been questions of audit. It's something when I took over the portfolios that I've taken over, like everybody else, I've been very, very concerned about a definitive on 106 monies and the transactions and the balances of them. And I don't believe, to be quite honest, that they've actually been prevalent in the past. But what I hope we've demonstrated today, which is endorsed, as I set out at the very beginning, by the infrastructure statement that we now have to do on a quarterly basis, that from here on there will be accountability that is transparent. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Karen Bradford, I think, wants the final word on the matter.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm struggling to get my video on, but I'm sure everybody knows what I look like. Just to reiterate a couple of points, please, Chairman. Yes, Jeff Upton, that you've met today, is our interim head of planning and planning policy, as members are aware through the members update, which I do send out. Jeff is with us on a contract for 6 months while we've advertised the job, and we've actually re-advertised the job because we weren't happy with the quality of the application. So I hope that helps Councillor Baxter with that answer. As Richard already, in response to something else that Councillor Baxter asked, that yes, it has already been agreed by this committee today. There are quarterly reports to planning committee. There will be 6 monthly reports to this committee, and the information is available on the website. And we'll ensure that there's better engagement with parish councils and town councils. The last thing we want to do is lose any of this 106 money. It needs to be better tracked and better managed. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Can we now move on to agenda item 7 then? The interim audit report, revised final. I should say internal. Missed my wordings again. Is Richard going to start this, or are we going straight to the Amjad?
I think Amjad will introduce the report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So agenda item 7 is our second follow-up report that we do 2 a year. It starts on page 77, Mr. Chairman. On page 78, you'll see the list of 6 reports from the 2019-20 work that we did that we've followed up. It consists of 37 management actions, 17 medium and 20 low. From our review, we note that the council has made good progress in implementing previously agreed actions. Of the 37, 23 had been fully completed. 2 were ongoing, so they're in the process of being implemented. 1 had been superseded, and there were 9 that had not been implemented, and 2 were not yet due. So those that had not been implemented, were ongoing, or were not yet due, have been re-raised in this report. What we will be doing is we'll be following those up in due course. The details of those actions are on page 81. The detail all the 13 or so actions that again have not been fully implemented. So as I said, we will continue to follow those up until they are done so, Chair. We have given it good progress, as more than 75% have been implemented. But I'll take any question members may have.
And no members have actually indicated that they wish to speak on this item.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to speak, but I'm having... Oh God.
Oh dear. Come on, carry on then, Mark.
Issues with my software, which is playing up like crazy today. Hello?
We can hear you. Yeah.
I completely... Oh, the picture's come back. Right. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I thank you... Amjad, for the report, and I take the point you're making that over 75% of these have been followed up. But for me, the concern is that certainly around some areas, such as void management, which has been an issue that a number of councillors have raised over the past. Nothing seems to be happening there, and also in the planning service, there seems to be sort of very little action taking place there as well. And within the area of risk management, again, while some have been implemented, some haven't. I mean, these are, for me, are 3 pretty key areas. Because we're aware that, void management has been raised as an issue before by this committee and other committees, and in full council as well. We know there's issues with the planning service because obviously we've got the Craters report, and risk management. For me, anything in risk management needs to be implemented as soon as possible. So just a few comments about what we can do to actually, or what you can do to actually get the message across that these things do need to be implemented. Thanks.
Karen Bradford would like to speak before I go back to Amjad.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I seem to be speaking quite a lot today, Chairman, and I know it's something that I've been living and breathing for the last number of months, along with Richard and the team around our audits and making sure, working with RSM, our auditors, to make sure we've got a stronger framework in place, which has been really critical. I think to assist with the debate and hopefully answer Councillor Whittington's question, the voids is a major issue for us. You may be aware that there was a very, very detailed report went to the Rural and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee recently, and also to the Cabinet, where this piece of work has been highlighted. We've benchmarked it, we've looked at standards, we've looked at what's wrong with the process. Now we're looking at how to find solutions to put it right. Yes, we've lifted the lid on voids, and if you able to look back at those committee meetings, it wasn't pleasant reading, and I know it was quite difficult for the team and for Councillor Reid to present that information, because it's not the kind of information we want to be presenting. So please have my assurances there is a spotlight on voids. Quality needs to be improved, inspections need to be improved, time turnaround needs to be improved, and cost of the works on the voids needs to be improved. However, I would also like to refer members to page 80 of the report, in the fact that the number of actions agreed was 37, and we've got 9 at the moment not being implemented. And I think within the report it does actually say the reasons why they've not been implemented at this stage, because we are developing a new voids policy based on the information that we've identified, and we need to make sure that the void standards are right to then inform what needs to be done next. So hopefully that just reassures you that you know, these reports on our audits are taken extremely seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Richard Wiles is next to speak.
Yeah, can I just explain why I have to keep putting my name? Because I've had to come in as a guest because I couldn't get through the other way. So I realise if I just put speak, you've got no idea who it is, because I think I'm coming up as a guest. So hence why I keep putting my name. But it's not that I've completely lost it this afternoon. I just wanted to perhaps reassure Councillor Whittington as well, because I think what's happening is there's a real temptation to look at the kind of bar graph and actually think the reds mean things aren't happening. And again, I just want you to reassure that the majority of those, with the exception of the one that Karen's just referred to, the void policy, they've not implemented because they've not yet hit their implementation date. So they're not lagging behind. And I think we ought to go away with RSM and just perhaps modify how that is presented to members, because I think at first glance it gives an impression that there are things that should have been implemented at this stage that haven't. So if you take the risk management one as an example that Councillor Whittington actually referred to, the implementation dates haven't yet occurred. They're the 30th of April, so they are in progress, to just not yet hit those trigger points. And I think it's probably slightly misleading to just to look at that graph and rightly assume therefore that things haven't been done. So just as well for members' benefit, Mr. Chairman, we're working on some software with RSM called For Action, and we are developing a dashboard which will give real-time information about how we're tracking and progressing on actions that have been agreed with RSM. And I think we can work on how that dashboard can be presented to members in a more succinct but perhaps more meaningful way to save this confusion of having to look backwards and forwards on pages to actually understand what's happening against each of these actions. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. If I may, Mr. Chairman, just one comment. Thanks for that, Richard. I know on some systems I've seen where they use a kind of, a RAG type approach, they use a sort of an arrow to mark the direction of travel. So even though something may still be red or amber, you can actually see that it has moved from the last time. So I'm just wondering if something like that could be implemented as part of it, because I think it would really help us all. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Reid.
Thank you. Just trying to keep on the same subject to start with, as Richard Wiles has mentioned about the RSM. I'd like to report, please, Chairman, that Chris Stratford, my interim Assistant Director of Housing, is having a meeting with the Auditor on the 11th of February to discuss the Summer Audit. And to that end, we will be updating, and we've provided to Tracy this mechanism. So the audit tracker has already been placed, and members will be given a clear indication of the progress made when the auditors report from the next audit. So that really puts my neck on the block, doesn't it?
Well, that's where it should be. Thank you, Robert.
If I can...
Jeff Upton wants to come in now on Richard's point.
Yep.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it was just picking up that point, because yes, the zeros in the spreadsheets around and the red in the columns around pages 79 and 80. There's a slight discrepancy there, because the couple of points for planning to be picked up have been implemented. So yeah, just really picking that up, and also to save Richard the extra strain of typing his name on my system. Your name is coming up, Richard. So so yeah, you can take that as read, I think. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Amjad, do you want to respond to?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, a couple of points. Councillor Whittington mentioned about yes, there are a number of actions that have not been implemented, but we take the whole picture. So we either say it's good progress, reasonable, or poor. And it is pleasing to know that a lot of the actions have been implemented. We do make sure that we sort of re-raise the ones that are not implemented, and also make sure we include those that are ongoing, where there's some progress being made, so we can still continue to monitor those and make sure that we continue to follow those up until they are implemented. And just to reiterate what Richard has said about the system that's being put in place. So effectively, for action, how that works is every report that we issue, we will put all those actions coming out of those onto for action with the implementation dates, with the relevant officer. And that effectively what happens is that fires off emails to those individuals so they're aware that they've got to implement those actions. And there's an escalation process that if they don't do it by a certain time, their line manager then gets notified that it hasn't been done. So hopefully that will reduce the number of outstanding actions. But if I was to compare yourselves to other similar sector organisations that we work with, I would say that when it comes to follow-up work, you're actually ranked quite high in terms of the reports we tend to give you tend to be mostly around good progress or reasonable, whereas some of them, they might not be the case. So I think you can take some assurances that action has been taken. But, you know, as auditors, we're quite strict. As soon as we hit the deadline, we'll come in and say, right, it's not been done. And sometimes members are still working on that process and it takes a lot longer to do. But rest assured, we'll continue to follow up those actions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Amjad. We note those comments, and I'll move on to agenda item 8. I presume Richard is going to do this because these are the updates on the internal audit follow-up 1 report.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were just very conscious at the last meeting there was rightly so, some disappointment by the committee about, picking up on Councillor Whittington's earlier point about some of the loss of traction on number of recommendations, and the process is such that RSM, as our auditors, would come back in 6 months' time and undertake a follow-up, but we got a strong sense of concern about the lack of progress on a number of those that were featuring on that November report that RSM presented. So we as officers stepped outside of the RSM process to undertake our own follow-up review to perhaps put back some reassurance to the committee ahead of RSM doing the formal review later in the year. So we took from that report 17 management actions that had either missed or had been delayed from the agreed dates, and as officers we worked across the council to identify and track each of those actions. So this report is to bring you right up to date with the actions that were identified, and you'll see in the report the detail of those 17 actions and then a status against each of those. I just wanted to just clarify with members in terms of the breakdown of those actions. Implementation ongoing is actually 6 rather than 5 in the summary, and therefore not implemented is 1 rather than 2. And then that correlates with the breakdown further in the document. But you can see of the 17, all have been implemented except 1 where it's not yet due and 1 that's now no longer required. So hopefully that gives members the reassurance that they were seeking the last time we talked about follow-ups. Thank you.
There appears to be nobody wanting to talk about that, so they're obviously very happy and thankful that you've put this paper in place to explain what has been happening. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
So we go to agenda item, what was it, 9? Whatever, the indicative audit plan. Is that you again, Richard?
I'll be supporting Amjad, so I think Amjad just introduced the document and I'll add some context.
Right, that's fine. Carry on, Amjad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If members can turn to Appendix A, which is on page, bear with me, Mr. Chairman, I think it's page 103, Mr. Chairman. So just to give members a bit of background, so we've had ongoing discussions with the management team about formulating an audit plan for next year from the 1st of April for 2021-22. And the discussions involved us not just having the conversations, but we provided an area of a consideration document to officers, basically detailing the type of audits that we've done at other local authorities, what's happening in the sector, looked at what we've done previously at South Stephen District Council. And based on those discussions, what we've done is put this document together, which is in front of you today, detailing some of the areas that we are looking to cover as part of the audit plan. At this point in time, this is just an indicative plan, and what we'd welcome is comments from members from this committee on any areas that they think should be included. The intention is that once we've got all the details, we will update the document and bring a full plan to the March Governance and Audit Committee meeting. And one point to note here, Mr. Chairman, is that whatever the document looks like when we bring it to the March committee, the internal audit plan is flexible. So during the course of the year, as you know, risk and profiles change, things happen, so we can chop and change the audit work as members and management team see fit. So we've done that in the past where we've added the audit plan, priorities have changed, and we've taken audits out and put other audits in to meet the needs of the committee, management and the council. So what you have in front of you today is effectively just an indicative list of audits with very much high level scopes on areas that we can cover in 21-22. Once this committee meeting's finished, and we're hoping maybe in the next week or two we get some feedback from members, what we will then do is incorporate all this, have further discussions with the management team and bring a full audit plan to the March's meeting. So really it's for members to just give their thoughts on areas where they think that we should include. There are a number of areas that we are including in there that you'll see are things that we've identified risks in the past. So, management team are quite keen for us to come in and do further work on housing compliance, on the stock side of it, which, as you know, we've just discussed a short while ago. Something around companies, disabled facilities grants, an area that we haven't looked at for some time, and it feels that it may be a good one to do. An area that we have included that we've not done in the past, Mr. Chairman, is the one that's on page 107 at the bottom of the page, called continuous assurance. And I think we may have briefly discussed it last time when Rob Barnett, the partner, was at the meeting. And what that means is, as well as doing your core audit work, what we will do is we'll identify about 10 key fundamental controls in the authority across both financial and operational areas, and we will come in and do quarterly reviews of those controls. And what will happen is at each committee meeting you'll get a report saying whether they passed or failed that control. So for example, one may be on gas safety, there might be something on reconciliations, there might be something on section 106 payments. We will agree those controls with the management team, and what happens is with those key fundamental controls you can then see over a time frame whether those controls are working, and if they're not working, then members and management can look to see if there further work needs to be done or whether internal reviews need to be undertaken to enhance the control framework in those areas. And the other thing we're aiming to do is, in previous years and this year, we've only done 2 follow-ups a year. Going forward, speaking to the management team, we're anticipating doing 4 follow-ups a year, which means that we'll bring more regular reports on follow-ups to you. Rather than one every 6 months, we'll bring a quarterly report. So they're the areas that we've put in at the moment as an indicative plan, but we would welcome comments from members so we can put a full document together and bring that to the March committee, Chair.
Thank you very much. It's nice to have a meeting before March so that you can explain to the members that you would like their assistance in framing any new reports that are required. Councillor Sue Woolley.
Thank you, Chairman. This may not be the right place to ask, but what I'm noticing from residents is a common complaint around the local authority and searches that have to take place. There are complaints about the length of time, which might be a separate issue, but there are also complaints around the quality of the information provided. Now, is that an auditable teeth in? Is that an auditable area? Because it's certainly something that is of interest to the public, and I struggle to be able to assure my residents that it's absolutely fine, they've got a super duper department and they get things done as quickly as possible, and you know, there is a little bit of a wobble there, so happy to be guided.
Robert, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much. As we all know, stamp duty is, particularly where property searches and local searches are concerned, it's very volatile at the moment, owing to the stamp duty holiday. And so at this moment in time, we are experiencing again quite a high volume. At the time of talking to you, I understand that we are about 15 days behind. I monitor this situation. It is, where searches are concerned, pretty much demand led. There have been, I will admit, problems in the past, and we bring in now an agency resource when we see peaks in the level of responses that are required, and that has expedited the situation. We're fully aware, like my fellow Councillor Sue Willie has said, you know, when you are in-house transactions and it is being delayed because of the searches not coming back, that, you know, really is most unhelpful, and so we are trying to manage that, as indeed we are with personal searches as well. Thank you.
Thank
you. Can that be checked on an audit, though? That was my question.
The question, I think, is that I don't see any reason why we shouldn't have a bar chart or a graph as to the that could come to audit as to the number of searches and source on one side, and the length of time of response on the other, so that we can show the performance of the service that's monitored. I can't see any problem with that at all.
Thank you. That would be very helpful. I think the query I would just raise is, well, if it hasn't been audited in the recent past, or indeed in the past at all, I just think it's good practice. I think that the quality of the work and the turnaround could probably just be sense checked, and certainly against, say, most similar family, as it were, or most similar district councils, just to see where we are.
Thank you for that too. Councillor Mark Whittington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had to turn my camera off because I'm experiencing problems with various things, including the chat function today. Just some comments really on the plan. I'm really pleased to see that the housing compliance and is in there as well, because obviously we're very much aware of the housing report that was recently submitted, and I think it's pretty important that the internal audit keep an eye on the progress of the plan that's in place. I'm really pleased to see that one in, and also the ones on the stock repairs as well. In terms of the medium-term financial strategy, obviously yes, I think it's important that that's in, because as the document says, you know, follow the impact of COVID. It's a lot of local authorities, you know, are going to face increased financial challenges, and the document rightly refers to the recent problems the Croydon Council have been having. I mean, not that we're anywhere close to the issues that Croydon have, but I'm really pleased to see that that's in, because I think that's really important, because we know going forward in the medium term we have got some gaps in some of our budgets for the next several years. That'd be quite useful. As a member of the Cummins Committee, really pleased to see that the council subsidiary things in there regarding the financial and governance arrangement for the companies, because I think the Cummins Committee would be interested in that as well. And disabled facilities grant, yes, this is always quite often I've been involved in this, not just as a district councillor but as a county councillor, and there just always seems to be some issue about this. So I'm pleased to see that that's in. The only thing I would like to maybe see potentially, Amjad, if possible, and I know we spoke about the voids earlier, and I was pleased with the comments that were made by the officers and the portfolio holders, but if possible a follow-up might be quite useful, just to give us the assurance that everything that the officers have spoken about today is happening. I think will be quite useful. Apart from that, I think it's a good programme. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Robert Reid, I think you're up down twice. You want to speak as well on HSE?
Yes, just to assure yourself, Chairman, and indeed other committee members, that we are working towards making a report on HSE to you on the 18th of March. That is something that I am doing as a team with the Chief Executive, the Leader of the Council, and indeed the Interim Assistant Director of Housing. And we are and I'd like people to know that we are monitoring the delivery and the improvement structure on a weekly basis. Agendas are set by me on Mondays and we meet on Tuesdays, and I have every reason to believe that we should be well placed for the publication of your papers on the 10th of March. That's on that one. Where voids are concerned, yes, I was just looking back as to when we were going to make a further reference back to the Rural and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and indeed the final outputs. And I think there's some expectation, well, there's going to be every expectation that we're back to you with a voids update in 12 months, but quite honestly, I would fully understand the quest that we come back to you within the next 6, owing to the exercise of trying to bring down the loss of rental income and indeed look after our ever increasing housing demand on the housing register as well. I know it's dear to all of our hearts. There is a saving there by lessening the length of time voids are, there is calculations of 800,000 to 1.2 million, which is an exorbitant amount of lost revenue. I'm sure we're all fully understandable that we won't get it down to 0, but it would be great to see it halved, and indeed that we actually managed to fall into the pattern of what other district authorities do, because our voids turnaround is twice the national average, and the improvements though we're working on it, I would expect you people to be auditing, and we want to actually see a red change to at least an amber on that particular department. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I see you want to speak twice, Richard, so please carry on.
Yeah, it was such a key part, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't help myself. It was just really to follow up firstly on kind of making the point that and members will be very aware of this. This is that we've got finite resources within the audit plan, because clearly we effectively pay a day rate for the audit time. So we need to be just mindful of making sure that the plan aligns now with the budget proposals that Cabinet have put forward. That said, I welcome Councillor Woolley's views around Section 106. Of course, the internal audit strength is around internal control framework checks. So if the issues are more around performance and quality of service, then there may still be other ways we can get the assurances that Councillor Woolley was talking about, but perhaps not necessarily with RSM. So if she allows and the committee allows that, we'll take that away with Jeff and others to shape how we could perhaps get the assurances that members were looking for, but not necessarily through the audit, annual audit plan. And also just to re-emphasise that those audits that have had no assurance or low assurance will automatically be reviewed again as part of this plan. So 106 and the housing and the stocks that we've talked about earlier this afternoon will find their way back into this plan irrespective of any new items. So hopefully that again gives members reassurance that these key areas won't get lost along the way. They will be very much featuring in the plan for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor, no, it's Karen Bradford next. I nearly missed you, Karen. Sorry.
That's okay, Chairman. I thought you were going to call me Councillor then. Just a couple of bits to add. Councillor Reid just mentioned there around the follow-up check on the housing compliance. I don't want us to mistake to confuse this with, I know Councillor Reid put HSC in the chat part, the Health and Safety Executive, of course. We are still waiting on that report in reference to Riverside, and it's proposed that should be around April time that we receive that. This is the health and safety compliance side for the authority. And of course, as members are aware, the social housing regulator will also be checking monthly with us on our improvement plan and the actions around the housing compliance activities. And that's all I just wanted to clarify. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Sue Woolley, did you want to come back?
I did, yes, and I want to be grumpy.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Richard has made a comment, and I hear what he's saying, but I suppose my point would be that leading up to my comments around looking at an audit of the searches, it's only got to this point because having been reassured, and a number of others being reassured, that everything's running quite smoothly, it's okay, reasonably okay, it's not running well. And so I don't think it's an officer, I think it has got to the point where it needs to be a formal audit, in that, being very blunt, and I don't mean to be, but yeah, officers have come back, certainly to me and to others as well. So slight pushback there with, no, I'd still like it to go through an audit process. And if it's wonderful, then it'll only take a couple of hours or so to do, won't it, Richard?
Chair, again,
Yes.
what may I speak again? Once again, I can't get it in the chat box.
Yes, certainly, Philip.
Thanks very much. Just to reiterate what Sue has just said, I think it was at my second finance meeting that I attended, so that's back end of 2019, that I brought up the searches as a request from other people in the town who were who were having a problem with searches. And for the first meeting, I got no reply at all. And then Councillor Gill, who was chairing that meeting, insisted that we should get a reply. And I think it was a little bit next meeting after that that I got a reassurance that everything was wonderful. Just a statement saying, we've had problems, we did have problems for a little while, we had shortage of staff, but now it's all sorted, we're up to date, we're sorted, searches are good, everything's fine. And then at that point, I think Councillor Gill made a point in the meeting that the response was poor because it gave no figures whatsoever of what had been the problem, what in numbers terms, and what the situation was now, and we've heard nothing since. And obviously through the COVID shutdown, we've heard nothing about this, and now it's raised its head again. We get reassurances without ever getting the numbers to back up that information. So it's about the third time I had a reassurance that was sorted, such as it's not a problem or it won't be a problem, but that's it. And of course, it continues to be a problem. And that's not good enough for our constituents who are having a problem with houses, particularly when the system is changing shortly and they wish to get the thing moving. So I reiterate everything that Sue says. I know we've spoken about it at the Town Council as well, I think. So yeah, we are aware of that. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that, Philip. I must admit I have had knowledge only this week of the fact that SKDC are taking 3 times as long as Newark and Sherwood to process searches. So I'm quite in agreement with what you say, Sue, that it should go onto a proper audit outside work rather than rely on the internal people.
Chair, could I just say something, please?
Yes, of course, Sam. I was just looking to see who was next.
I apologise. I just wanted to reiterate, I mean, in terms of the internal audit plan, as I mentioned, one of the areas that we're intending to do is look at 10 controls around continuous assurance. So whether it's something that we incorporate as part, control as part of that review, rather than doing a full big review as a starter and see how we get on as part of that continuous assurance. And that may assure members when we do that over a quarterly basis whether what we find is okay or not, and that can maybe lead to further down the lines in terms of a bigger audit. But as Richard mentioned, there is only a limited number of days and audits that we can do, and maybe this will fit into that continuous assurance element. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Jeff Upton.
Yes, Chairman, just getting my video on. Yes, I think there is some reporting that has been requested on the search process. I think that's to be provided with an update in the near future. I think what Amjad just mentioned probably is a reasonable sort of request, but I think there is some data that we can provide to give some reassurance on what's happened over the last period. As I think Councillor Reid mentioned earlier, it's been quite a busy time in terms of both the number of transactions coming through, but also the ability to access services for both customers and providing those services. So I think there's a forthcoming update with some information telling the story, if you like, in terms of volumes and how they've been dealt with over recent periods. And I think be supporting Councillor Reid in providing that update, and I'm sure that's something that could be reported back in due course. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Reid.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. You know, like other councillors, I hear sometimes the concerns which have happened periodically since I took over the portfolio, and yes, we need to put some numbers to the times of response so that we all know exactly how correct the information that members of the public are complaining to us about, and indeed a way in which of actually monitoring what's going on. I'm quite happy to suggest that I put a report together for the last 9 months. And indeed, I think that we should start to get a quarterly update published so as we can all actually track and know where we are on this pretty volatile request.
Thank you for that. I'm certainly happy with that.
Yeah.
Councillor Sue Woolley may not be. I'll ask her to come in.
I think, Chairman, this is where I go back to the points that I've already made around and indeed that Councillor Knowles has made We have, as it were, rumbled on for some time. I would also say that you will recall our governance and audit training, that this is something that this committee, we are the, as it were, the last point. And I think that if committee members wish to have something put onto that audit list, then it may be at the expense of something else. But if it's of sufficient seriousness, it is our choice whether it goes on to an audit list. No one else's. That's what this committee is there for. So I would still want to hold the line of having a formal audit. But I do accept that it would then in the future, following that, be a very good idea to have a regular update.
Yes, thank you for that point. I mean, it is noted the recommendations on page 99 is that the Governance and Audit Committee is asked to note the contents of the report, review the indicative internal audit plan at Appendix A, and make any suggested amendments prior to its approval in March 2021. Well, I think, Councillor Woolley, you've given us great cause to amend what is on that sheet. And I would ask that that is part and parcel, and that any other members of this committee want to make any suggestions, they can do so to Amjad or even to Richard Wiles, and then we can look at that before the next meeting and see what's on.
Thank you, Chairman.
Are we all happy with that? Thank you. Then we'll move on to agenda item 10, the Strategic Risk Register update.
Thank you.
Richard again?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This report came to you at your November meeting, and at that time and on that agenda, we started to map out the bare bones of the risk register, and we were asked to go and develop those columns in a more detailed way, particularly around the risk controls and also in terms of the actions required. So Appendix A is now the updated risk register, taking into account the 6 thematic approaches that we've adopted. And if I just work along the document left to right, so members are fully briefed on the contents. Starting at the top, we have the risk title and a description of the risk. So number 1 being ensured an effective and efficient internal control framework. We then have what we call the inherent risk score, and that's the score that without any controls and without any actions undertaken, what would be the exposure to the authority in terms of likelihood and impact should that risk become a reality. And also then as we work across the document further, we then have the current circumstances, which is the narrative around the current problem under that particular theme that the authorities are facing. We then have a whole list of risk controls that are in place to a greater or lesser extent in terms of how they've been implemented, how they're embedded, and how they're being delivered against. We then take those risk controls and then we update the risk score to reflect the impact they are having against the exposure, and we call that the residual risk score. So what you can see is the movement of the white circle between the gross risk or the inherent risk, and as it moves along to the residual risk, and that should be a positive direction of travel. It won't completely remove the risk in most instances, but it will reduce or mitigate it down further. On the far right column, a final column, are further actions that are required or further necessary strengthening mechanisms over those risk controls. So that's kind of the more to do column, more work to be undertaken. So that's how we're going to track and progress and monitor those strategic risks. We talked about software earlier called For Action, which was around the internal controls, the internal audit controls weaknesses they've identified. There's a sister system called For Risk, which follows a similar methodology, and all of this strategic risk register information is now populated on the For Risk platform. And again, going forward, we'll be able to produce a more dynamic dashboard for members, so we can track in real time the implementation of those actions and the progress we're making towards mitigating down those risks where possible. The intention is after today, after the committee have had the opportunity to comment on it, is to now produce this on a 6-monthly basis to the committee, so that you can track and monitor progress. And also, as we've said on the plan, as a kind of dynamic and responsive document, there will clearly be scenarios that will need to feature in this as we go forward, both internal and external influences that will change the risk exposure of the authority as it moves forward. And the risk register will need to capture those and update them when necessary. So hopefully members will find it more useful. I think the colour helps trying to highlight the direction of travel against each of those risks, and adds a bit more kind of engagement with the document itself. But we're happy to take feedback on this. It's the first time I think it's been presented in this way for the committee, so we obviously would welcome feedback in the way that you've commented on the presentation of some of the early reports, and clearly we can go away and adapt it as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Mark Whittington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first comment is, Richard, this is really good document, because you know since I've been a member, I've gone on a little bit about risk registers and stuff in various meetings, and this is great because it lays out where we are on the risk matrix. You know, it's really easy to follow. The only thing I would say, and I think it's going to be difficult for you, because the comment you've made during your presentation that some of these risks are inherent risks and they're always going to be there. Because in the action required, I was initially going to say some indication of implementation would be useful, but then I thought to myself, well, actually, some of the actions you possibly can give an implementation date for, but others potentially, because the risk is always going to be there, that all you can ever say is ongoing. Does that make sense? But I'm just thinking if maybe if you could, I don't know, just because or if maybe allied to this, there could just be kind of a little implementation plan. Just again, it comes back to my point earlier, just a little bit around the direction of travel, if that makes sense. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. It's the actions kind of stray from it's a task and finish activity, so it's implement a scoring methodology, or it's a implement you know, as what I'm looking at there is unstakes and stress testing. So some will be, as you say, ongoing activities. There'll be things that we'll need to do on a regular basis, routinely undertake them, but some will be, here's a task, somebody needs to do it, and they need to do it by then. And I think, yeah, there's clearly more columns, and we're very conscious of that, you know, because there's so much information we could be putting in this. And I'd like to see against each of those actions required an action owner, a date, a milestone, an implication if it gets missed. But it's obviously being conscious about information overload and not overcomplicating the messaging that should be resonating from the document itself. So the For Risk dashboard that I referred to, the IT software, will allow us to go further into those actions required and start to assigning it to people and then holding people to account to make sure actions are implemented. But it is a valid point that it can't just end with a column of a number of tasks. It's got to have some ownership and accountability around those as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. A good explanation, and it seems to have helped the committee, because there's nobody else wants to speak. So they must be very happy with the way that you presented it in this instance. So we go to the recommendation that as a committee, we're asked to note the contents of the report and review and approve the draft strategic risk register attached to Appendix A. And I feel sure that that is all acceptable. Thank you. Councillor Reid is typing a message. Do you want to speak, Councillor Reid?
That's most gracious of you, Chairman. I need to beg my leave to go to Employment Committee, if you'll permit me. Thank you.
I thought you'd have gone before.
Oh, I've made them wait.
All right, no problems. Thank you. Agenda item 11 is the Treasury Management Strategy. Richard, is it? No, it's Alison. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This report details the 2021-22 Treasury Management Strategy. As members are aware, the Council is required to produce a Treasury Management Strategy on an annual basis. The strategy covers two main areas, capital and Treasury management. The capital section includes the capital plans for the Council and alongside the funding of the plans, as these provide a guide to the Council's borrowing need and assist with longer term cash flow planning. The associated prudential indicators and the minimum revenue provision policy, which relates to the provision the Council is required to make to reduce the general fund borrowing need. This policy is detailed on page 137 and remains unchanged from the current year policy. The Treasury management sections of the strategy provide details of the borrowing investment strategies, the Treasury indicators and the credit worthiness policy. Pages 140 to 143 detail the counterparties that the Council will place investments with and the limits that can be invested. There is a change to this section of the strategy compared with the current year, as there is a proposal that the Council changes the limit that the Council can invest with a body of high credit quality. The proposal is that this limit is increased from 10 million to 15 million and the corporate group limit is increased from 12 million to 15 million pounds. This change is proposed as the level of investments the Council has held during the year has been higher than anticipated, and the current limits are restricting where the investments can be placed, and the Council needs to ensure that it is able to spread investments across a number of institutions, as this enables us to manage counterparty risk. Page 132 of the report details changes made to the PWLB lending terms in November 2020, alongside a 1% reduction in PWLB borrowing rates. The main point that members need to note with these changes to the lending terms is that the PWLB will no longer lend to councils if their 3-year capital spending plans include the purchase of investment assets primarily for yield. There will be no impact currently on the council, as a 3-year capital programme does not include the purchase of investment assets. The final point that members need to note is that a number of tables in the strategy will need amending prior to the strategy being approved by council, following the budget amendments agreed by Cabinet earlier in the week. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for those. Mark Whittington again. Very good.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Alison, for a very good report, which I enjoyed reading through, and it's really good. And I found it a very good report, very informative. I've only got one slight question, which is probably on the strategy. We're referring to our limit of £5 million that we would potentially loan to other local authorities, parish councils. I can't remember and this is probably a reporting issue from the actual implementation, do we currently loan any money to any other local authorities? Because I'm very much aware that when Croydon went, I mean, obviously I know that any money potentially that we do loan to any local authorities, if they did get into financial troubles like Croydon did, and I know they owed money to a number of local authorities, in effect, though they're secured creditors anyway. But I'm just wondering, before we would loan money to a local authority, would we kind of just look at their report, their last report accounts, just to kind of see where they were? Because, you know, I know it's not always apparent, because the issues with Croydon only became apparent well after the close of their previous financial year. But I'm just wondering if as part of what we do, if we actually look at the risk there. Thanks.
We do have several investments with local authorities. From memory, I think it's we've got 3 or 4 investments, but obviously I can provide further details if you require them. When we enter into these agreements, we do it through our Treasury advisors. We don't currently undertake any of these checks, but obviously that is something we can build in. But as you are aware, a local authority can't, when they're in financial difficulty, they do get support from government. So there is some assurance there that we would actually get repayment of the loan. And obviously we do limit the amount that we lend to each authority as well, which obviously helps manage the risk of those investments. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Thank you.
Chairman, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm always good at that. Thank you, Alison. We are to recommend to the Council that the 2021-22 Treasury Management Strategy is approved. There will be changes apparently, but that is what is before us at the moment. Anybody that wants to object, or would they like to put it in the chat show? So that appears to be carried. Sorry, Richard, I missed it.
So, Mr. Chairman, you've gone to the vote now, so it doesn't matter.
That's all right. Well, that's what you wanted, isn't it?
You'll never know, Mr. Chairman, now.
That's all right. I probably will. So we've got the next item is agenda item 12, I think, which is the work programme, and I think we're all happy with that. Particularly the Vice Chairman, who noticed that something was on there, the Planning Service External Review. So we'll look forward to the next meeting, which is, I think, the 18th of March from what it says here. I've got no other matters to bring to the committee, so I would like to declare that the meeting is finished. And thank you all for your attendance. And see you again in March.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.